Started. So if you would not like to be recorded, you're free to turn off your video at any time. That is just fine. So there are 3 sessions in this series that I am calling How the Heck Do We Teach on Zoom? Tonight we'll be talking about lesson planning for Zoom. The next one will be about listening and speaking activities. And then the others will be about reading and writing activities. So those are about how we adapt our in-person activities for Zoom. And our overarching question for all of these is about student-centeredness. It feels like Zoom is very, very teacher-centered, so we are challenging ourselves to still create student-centered lessons on Zoom. That's our guiding question. So for tonight, by the end of the night, I hope that you will be able to describe how in-person Ella best practices can be adapted to Zoom, that you'll be able to explain how student-centered lesson objectives impact our choice of lessons, and that you'll be able to identify examples of the gradual release of responsibilities on Zoom. It looks different on Zoom than it does in person. And if all of that sounds overwhelming because you're brand new to the program, don't worry, we'll catch you up. So we will be talking a lot about best practices tonight. And if you came through foundations training recently, you'll be familiar with this term. But for everybody else, remember that when we're talking about Ella best practices, we're talking about those big practices, the overarching things that create the classroom environment, that set the tone for the classroom. So if you can think of one of those, please go to the chat and type one of those. We're connecting to your prior knowledge here, tapping back into what you know, what we've talked about before. It's also a loyalty test. Let's try to get 5 best practices in the chat. Nancy says, I'm glad we're going over this because it's been too long. Yeah, be friendly and open, make a stress-free environment, have fun, be silly. Let's look at Diane's there. What are some of the ways that we can make a stress-free environment? What kind of practices make a stress-free environment? Yeah, don't put people on the spot. Use plenty of wait time. Lots of encouragement. Make mistakes. Praise effort. Stay calm. Yes, getting to know students, building community. Great. Great. That's a great start. So we're going to keep adding to that list as we go through the evening. Lizzie is keeping track of these, and we'll be screen sharing these throughout the evening so we can come back to them. Great start, everybody. Okay, so let's jump into the fun stuff. We are going to go into breakout rooms. You have so many documents open, I can't keep track of where I am. Okay, we're going to go into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. You're going to be with a partner, and you should talk about these 3 things: their name, where they're from, and what they hope to learn tonight. And I'm going to put these questions in the chat so that you can see them when you're in the breakout room. You'll need to take notes or do something to help you remember, because you're going to introduce your partner when we get back into the main room. Okay, so let me put those questions in the chat. You can refer to the chat when you're in the breakout room, and we'll be in there for about 5 minutes.
Kate, I do not have the power to make breakout rooms.
Oh no. Okay. I'll do it right now. One of you will be in a group of 3. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody.
Let's see, we've got a few more we're still waiting on. I have regained my breakout room power.
Resume juggling.
About 10 seconds till everybody gets kicked back, Kate. And there we go, there's everybody.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. So you're going to be introducing your partner in the chat box. So for example, if I was introducing Lizzie, I would say Lizzie Studstill is from Atlanta. She hopes to learn about lesson planning tonight. So please write your partner's name, where they're from, and what they hope to learn tonight.
If there's one thing I wish Zoom could do for me that it's not there yet, it's background music.
Ooh.
I want like waiting room, like soft jazz, elevator music.
That'd be
built
awesome.
into Zoom.
That'd be good. All right, let's see what we've got here. We've got Margaret from Iowa. Margaret, will you wave? Margaret from Iowa, she's excited to learn about Zoom-specific lesson planning. We have Susan Petrus. We've got Diane from Minnesota. She hopes to learn about lesson planning. We've got Elise from Reno, and she would like to learn about how to form activities. We've got Shannon, she's from Florida, and she's looking for ideas of where to start lesson planning. We've got Shirley, who is currently in Park City. She would like to learn more about Zoom and how to adapt lesson plans. Bruce from Massachusetts, he wants to refresh. Got Kathy from Ohio. She's excited about Zoom lesson planning. Okay, Susan's from Texas originally, but has been in Tucson for 22 years. And she wants to learn it all because she's a brand new LC volunteer. We've got Deb, who's from Durango. She wants to learn lesson planning. We've got, oh boy, they're coming in. Karen from Michigan, who spent some quality time in Minnesota and wants to learn about teaching on Zoom. And we've got Nikki Burtonshaw from Santa Fe and Albuquerque, who's been teaching with us for 5 years, and she'd like to learn these new materials for teaching on Zoom. And there's Dave. Hi, Dave.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so let's think about that activity. In the chat, tell me about what was the benefit of this activity and why would we do it in a Zoom class? Lizzie, do you want to read the chats as they come in?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got one more bonus. It's Nancy from Tucson, who also wants to learn more about lesson planning.
I'm glad you all are excited about tonight's topic. Everybody's on board with it.
All right, we've got them coming in now. So Nancy says it's a good icebreaker. It's a good relationship builder. You get a chance to just talk to one person. And then you also get in some good practice in the chat. Deb, it shows how to get information from students and make the class centered around them. So they fill in the material that you need. Shannon gives us the opportunity to get to know each other, and it's more informal for sure. Shirley, build class rapport. Bruce, to get acquainted. Diane, makes people talk. Yes, it does. An opportunity to get comfortable with breakouts from Nancy, which is also true. Something that's more low stakes so that we just know what the breakout rooms feel like. Susan, good to speak one-on-one with someone. Kathy, got to meet a new person and learn a little bit. It builds connection. Bruce, practice writing because you're in the chat. And Elise, the students don't talk over each other because we went into those side rooms.
Absolutely. So there are many benefits to this kind of breakout activity. We're building community, which is super important on Zoom because we don't have the, we don't have the physical connection. We can't really read each other's body language. It's just a weird platform. But so putting people in those much smaller breakouts helps break that tension. And especially for people who are practicing English, that's a much lower stakes place to be practicing than in this big room. I heard a lot of you mention that it helps students learn the technology. So they're getting more comfortable with that breakout experience. They're working on their typing skills, or if they're on their phones, their texting skills, in addition to their English writing. It's fun. And Elise mentioned a really good point that's specific to Zoom, is that the reason that we are using chat so much is that Zoom can't handle it when multiple people talk at the same time. Maybe you've heard that in other calls. It gets all glitchy and the sounds fight over each other. So in a larger group, using chat instead of talking helps manage that. But if you were in a smaller group, you could definitely do it, have students unmute themselves and each person talk. We did that a lot in my class. But for a larger group, chat is a really an easy way to manage that. So how did we set up this activity? Let's go back to the beginning. How did I introduce this activity? Diane says in the first session, it's okay for students to use their native language. I think, especially dealing with tech stuff, use the native language. Allow them to use the native language, because that's about learning the tech, not about learning the English. Sorry, Lizzie, would you read those as they come?
So how did we set up this activity? We got the questions first from Nancy Hand, and Deb, using the screen share again, you gave us the visual, what we needed to do. From Elise, you gave us a fill in the blank, so we didn't have to make a whole sentence.
So just like in-person class, we've got the visual support, we've got the modeling, and we've got what the fill in the blank we call sentence frames. So sentence frames are a great way to manage that multi-levelness in the class. The advanced students don't need the sentence frames. They could compose that part of the sentence. They're fine. And they're gonna compose something more advanced after the sentence frame. But the sentence frame really supports the lower level students. We're giving them a little bit of a boost, and then they can carry on from there. So it's a way of accommodating those diverse proficiency levels. So Lizzie, would you share that best practices list?
I will. So while we are going through, I'm keeping a list of the best practices that we talk about in a Google Doc that you'll get later. Some of these all of these come from what you shared at the top of the class when we said what best practices to remember. So a lot of these have to do with building community. So as the teacher, being friendly and open, getting to know your students, lots of encouragement, and things like wait time. All of these came off of what you shared at the beginning.
So what can we add to this list that we just talked about? Throw it in the chat. Preparing.
Prepare.
Yes. Super important on Zoom. It is so different. When just planning this evening, you should see my lesson plan. It's colored. All of my Zoom moves are color coded. Everything I want Lizzie to do is color coded because it's such a different, well, it's such a new way of thinking about teaching that for me, I need to plan it very explicitly.
Bruce adds modeling what to do.
Modeling, perfect. Great.
Yeah, Shirley adds you use PowerPoint. What if one isn't familiar with PowerPoint? It's one of some options.
And so both of you are picking up on the importance of the visual support. For this training, we're using, it's Google Slides that we're using so that Lizzie and I can edit it at the same time. But there are lots of other options for visual support that don't require this technology. So we're going to provide support coming up in October for PowerPoint and Google Slides, but you don't need that stuff. There are lots of ways to do it without it. So Lizzie, would you add visual support on there?
Deb adds or asks, what tool are you using to document your lesson plan and share it with your co-teacher?
Also using Google Docs because it's just really easy to share that way.
In the past, I've done Google Docs that I've shared, but I've also just written it in an email and sent that email.
You can handwrite it and send a photo. That works too. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint, Lizzie. You can? Oh wait, I can do that, can't I?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, are you seeing the PowerPoint or just me?
Just you.
Great, perfect. Okay. So, so how do we know what activities we should use in our lesson plans? Just like in person, we always want to ask ourselves, what do I want students to be able to do with English by the end of the lesson? So I'm thinking about what the students can do, not the material that I want to cover. That's teacher-centered. We want to think about what the students can do with English by the end of the lesson. So let's look at an example. I'm going to share the PowerPoint again. So, oh wait, I just gave you the answer. What do I want you to be able to do by the end of tonight? Put it in the chat.
I always want to wait a second to get a few more answers in there, but we're getting it in one from several people. A lesson plan on Zoom, plan your first lesson.
Yes. Yes. Do you remember this?
Confidence.
Gain confidence. Yes. Yeah. So those are my big goals, obviously. But when I was planning this session, I tried to think about what are the components of lesson planning? What are the baby steps leading up to the lesson planning?
Elise sends, think about creating learning objectives.
Exactly. Thank you for the segue, Elise. So these were my objectives for tonight. When I was planning this evening, I thought of what exactly I wanted you to be able to do. So I knew that I wanted you to be able to describe the best practices. I knew that I wanted you to be able to explain about these objectives that we're talking about and how that impacts lesson planning. And then I knew that I wanted you to be able to identify good examples of gradual release of responsibility. So all of these things go together into a lesson plan. I was struggling to plan this evening when I was just thinking about lesson planning. But when I really sat down and I wrote these participant-centered objectives, then things fell into place, because when we're choosing our activities, if we know what we want students to be able to do, we can easily select the activities that will get them there. So knowing where we want to go, well, knowing what we want students to be able to do allows us to very easily plug in activities that will help them get there. So I chose all of these activities for this evening based on what I wanted you to be able to do at the end. And, you know, with lesson planning, you can get very formal with it. I got very formal with it because that's how my brain works. But you can just jot it down while you're lesson planning, and you'll find that it just takes away so much of that stress, because you know where you are going and your students are at the center of it already when you choose those student-centered objectives. So we're going to look more at that. But first, I lost all of my notes. Okay. But first, you've already been sitting for a half hour. So let's do a stretch break. You can turn off your cameras if you like. I'm going to leave mine on so I can lead you in the stretch break. And one thing that I learned, you know, I was doing endless webinars back in March when I was like, oh, I don't have any work to do. The program is lost. So I was doing lots of webinars, and I went to one about trauma and the brain. And the research shows that any kind of cross-body movement or oppositional movement, you can't see me because I'm geez. So for example, if I'm pushing up with my one arm and I'm pushing down with the other arm. Everybody try that. Oh. Now switch it. So this oppositional movement, I'm pushing up and I'm pushing down, and it's using both sides of my body, both sides of my brain. Oh, that's really good. Give yourselves a hug. That's really good. And cross your arm over your chest. Oh yeah. All those kinds of movements are really good at relieving stress and calming your nervous system. And they feel good. So we're about to get into something stressful. You may remember the French lesson from your training. We have a new, I won't say improved, but we have a new Zoom version of the French lesson. And let's see. So we're going to take a look at, there's our, oh, we need we need a skill before we jump into the French lesson. And that is using the annotate tool. So if you look at the screenshot here, you'll see view options up at the top of your screen. It blends in. It's black and it's right next to the green. Give me a thumbs up when you see that. Okay, cool. And then you click view options, and there's an option there for annotate. When you've got that option, please draw a squiggly or a smiley face or something like that on the screen. Very nice. Ooh. Great.
We're making art together.
Yes, it's beautiful. Okay, perfect. Perfect, good work, everybody. Wait a second. Okay, so you're gonna need that in a second. I'm gonna clear all of that. And So do any of you speak French? Any French speakers?
I'm studying French, but I don't speak French.
Okay. Nancy, you're really good with your Spanish will set you up for success in this activity. So pretend that you don't even speak Spanish.
Now we've got a hand up from Dave as well.
Okay. Okay, Dave, pretend that you don't speak any French. Pretend you're a beginner. So we're going to have a French class, and the object is not to learn the French. The object is to pay attention to what I'm doing as the teacher, what you're doing as the students, how you feel, and how much you learn. Okay? So don't worry about the French. Just pay attention to your experience as a student. Okay. Okay, are you seeing my PowerPoint still?
Yes, we are.
OK, d'accord la classe. Hier, nous avons discuté les adresses. Aujourd'hui, nous allons identifier les parties d'une adresse complète. Donc, regardez numéro 1. Tout le monde le voit bien, j'espère. OK, so d'abord, où est le prénom? Où est le prénom? Il faut que quelqu'un encercle le prénom, s'il vous plaît. On va utiliser l'outil d'annotation qu'on a déjà appris. Et s'il n'y a personne qui lève la main, s'il y a quelqu'un qui lève la main, je ne vois pas. OK, bon, je vais choisir quelqu'un. Je choisis à Diane. Diane, où est le prénom? Il faut encercler le prénom. Non? Shannon, où est le prénom? Let's see, Dave, où est le prénom? Il faut encercler le prénom. OK, bon, moi, je vais le faire. Moi, je vais le faire. Voilà le prénom. C'est ça le prénom. D'accord. Numéro 2. Numéro 2. Maintenant, on va souligner le nom de famille. On va souligner le nom de famille. Qui peut souligner le nom de famille? Good one, Bruce. Ah, d'accord. Qui l'a fait? Voilà. Le nom de famille, c'est ça. Voilà, le nom de famille. Le nom de famille, c'est ça. C'est ça. D'accord. Numéro 2. Numéro 2. Maintenant, on cherche le numéro du bâtiment. Qui peut encercler le numéro du bâtiment? Le numéro du bâtiment, qui peut le faire? D'accord, Deb. Très bien, Deb. Et enfin, on doit souligner le code postal. On doit souligner le code postal. Qui peut le faire? OK, Deb. Très bien, le code postal. D'accord. OK. Everybody take a breath. So let's see here. In the chat, tell me, what did the teacher do?
Talk too much.
Talk too much.
Spoke too fast. Intimidated the class from Dave. I felt that in my heart and I didn't have to be a
Ooh.
student.
That was stressful.
Didn't model,
Didn't model.
spoke French, did not repeat keywords,
No repetition.
seemed unaware of the stress, and asked too many things at once. No intro to the task.
Yeah, I just jumped right into it.
Very nice French from Deb.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
No purpose for the task given.
Good one. No purpose for the task. It's totally out of context. There's no grounding this in real life. Awesome. What did you do?
Oh, and Deb adds that you called out individual people.
I called out individual.
But for what did the students do? Tuned out, froze, tried to look small. Oh no. I'm seeing a lot of fear and got scared. Margaret adds guessed, just guessed.
Best. Mm-hmm.
Crickets.
Crickets.
Elise
Yeah.
tried to pick out recognizable words. All I got was code postal, but it's something.
Yep. So you were drawing, you're good students. You were drawing on all of your linguistic resources to try and make sense of what I was throwing at you. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and you felt it in your body. Anybody feel mad or annoyed? Like, you're wasting my time, lady? So remember, we talked about the affective filter. I think we talked about that in Lizzie's trainings. And that's the idea that when we feel stressed or unmotivated or disrespected, this filter comes up and the language won't come in. In this case, the French won't come in because our brain is occupied with trying to stay safe. So we want to lower the stress, increase the engagement and the motivation and the feelings of comfort and safety. So let's try French lesson number 2. And I'm going to stop sharing. Am I sharing right now?
You are. I can see your PowerPoint.
Oh. This is such a brain workout. Okay. Okay, here we go. Ok, la classe. Regardez-moi. Avec moi, tout le monde, levez les doigts. Levez les doigts, tout le monde. Le doigt. Ah, très bien, Lizzie, le doigt. Ok, très bien. Faites un cercle. Un cercle. Encercler. Tout le monde, encercler. 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 Très bien, encercler. Encercler, encercler, encercler. D'accord. Maintenant, tout le monde, souligner. 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 Encercler. Très bien. Souligner. Très bien. OK, on y va. On y va. OK. Voilà. I need to annotate. Bon. Moi, je vais encercler le prénom avec l'outil d'annotation. Moi, je vais encercler le prénom avec l'outil d'annotation. Maintenant, tout le monde, il faut encercler le prénom. Encercler le prénom, tout le monde. Très bien, Dave. Nancy, Deb, Bruce, Diane, Margaret, Elise. Très bien. Maintenant, je vais souligner le nom de famille. Maintenant, je vais souligner le nom de famille. Voilà. Oh, très bien. Margaret, Shannon, Elise, Diane. Très bien, le nom de famille. Bon. Voilà le prénom. C'est le prénom. Ici, c'est le nom de famille. Le nom de famille. Très bien, très bien. OK, numéro 2. Numéro 2. Maintenant, on va encercler. Oups. On va encercler le numéro du bâtiment. Le numéro du bâtiment. C'est quoi le bâtiment? C'est quoi le bâtiment? C'est ça le bâtiment. Encercler le numéro du bâtiment. Très bien, très bien, très bien. Tout le monde. Très bien, très bien. OK. Maintenant, j'ai besoin de une personne. OK, Bruce. Bruce, soulignez le code postal. Le code postal. Très bien, Bruce. Très bien. Le code postal. Il a souligné le code postal. Très bien. OK, maintenant. Plus difficile. On cherche le numéro d'appartement. Qui peut, une personne? OK, Nikki. Nikki, encercler le numéro d'appartement. Yeah! Le numéro d'appartement. D'accord. Maintenant, on cherche la ville. Qui peut souligner la ville? Mais c'est quoi la ville? Qu'est-ce que c'est? Ah, c'est ça, la ville. OK, Nancy. Shannon, très bien, très bien. La ville. Oui. On habite en Tucson, c'est ça la ville. Très bien, tout le monde. Good work, everybody. Okay, so same questions. What did the teacher do?
Shannon modeled. Nancy demonstrated. Broke it down, repeated, talked slow, explained slowly and clearly with visual support. You expressed encouragement. Again, you repeated, you used your hands, used your fingers, added more visual support. With supportive feedback, much more voice inflection. You weren't just yelling at us. You made it fun. Friendlier, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the hands. Pop quiz. What is it called when we ask learners to do a motion or show an emotion? What's that called? It's 3 letters. It's an acronym. TPR, yeah. Total physical response. Because the idea is that when students move their bodies while they're learning, more neurons are firing, so those connections are stronger. So anytime we can integrate movement with the thing that we're teaching, that's gonna help. It accommodates different proficiency levels, it accommodates different learning styles, and it wires things together more. So modeling what I wanted you to do and then having you all physically do it even on Zoom, is super important. Great. Let's add those to the best practices before we jump to the students.
So visual support, TPR, modeling, offering
Repeating,
encouragement, repeating.
baby steps. Someone said breaking it down. Rather than just turning on the fire hose of French at you, I broke the activity down into baby steps to make it more accessible. Okay, so what did you do?
So we have better attention and focus, more engaged, paid attention, participated. Deb was listening for the repetition, eagerly participated, followed directions, mirrored Kate.
Awesome.
Followed what others were doing, even if you didn't know.
Yes, that's a fantastic strategy for accommodating those diverse proficiency levels, is doing as much visual stuff as possible, because then the lower proficiency students can see what the higher proficiency students are doing. And that's a support to get them, up to a similar level.
Get interested in figuring out the puzzle from Deb.
Yeah, it was it was stimulating instead of overwhelming because of the baby steps. Nice. So how did you feel?
Engaged. More capable. I like that. Interested, affirmed, successful, respected, secure, like I want to learn French. Still confused but better. That's a whole language classroom mood. Excited, more relaxed.
Awesome. Good. So we can say that those affective filters came down and you felt much more able to interact with the language because you weren't all freaked out. So let's test your French. Tout le monde, encerclé. Souligné. Very good. Nice work. What's my prénom? Kate. What's my nom de famille? Nobody knows that. Enrico. Nice.
You have it on your
I have it
camera,
on my,
Kate.
yeah. That wasn't as hard. Okay, great. So, yes, so you may remember from the objectives that one of the things I want you to be able to talk about after this evening is the gradual release of responsibility. And that is a fancy way of talking about those baby steps. And a good way of thinking about those baby steps that are involved in modeling and going through an activity is that first, I do it. The teacher does it. So just like I first showed you the motions, I did it, then we did it together. Then we transferred over to the screen, because my screen's over here. So then you were still doing it together. You were watching each other. I would praise the first person who got it, then everybody would realize that that's what they needed to be doing. And then finally, I asked for volunteers to do it solo. So I do it, we do it together as a whole class. Student groups do it, or pairs do it, and then a student does it individually. So we're taking away the support little by little. And often, especially because our time with our students is so limited, that individual work that you do it alone, that will often be homework, especially remotely, because what we discovered over the summer is that the students love homework. And we think maybe that's a function of it being COVID time and nobody has anywhere to go or anything to do. So they're like, sure, I'll do homework. So often in class, you'll see the I do, we do, you do it together in small groups. Questions about everything that we've done so far? We've been kind of barreling through stuff. Oh, Lizzie, would you talk about annotation tool and your class?
Yes. So in that activity, you got an extra bit of a Zoom bell and whistle that wasn't part of the Zoom basics that we did, which is that you can show your students how to also annotate on the screen when you're screen sharing. And it works the same way if you're in that Zoom whiteboard. Everyone can go up to the top and turn on annotation and write on the whiteboard. But I will say that this is definitely an extra. It's a Zoom bell and whistle. With my class of beginners, we never did this. I would never try to do this with my class of beginners. It's a fun tool and it's a good way to have people participate on screen, but it's definitely one of those ones where you have to think about, A, do your students have the English to understand the instructions? And B, do they have the comfort with the technology to do it confidently? You can still also do that on a phone and draw with your finger, but like with the chat, it's just a little bit more fiddly. So if all of your class is phones, maybe not. So it's an option and it's a fun option, but it varies class to class if it's a good fit. I never used it.
I never used it in the intermediate class either, but I used it as a teacher. Speaking of visuals, I want to take a step back here and look at the first teachers. So here's the first teacher's slide. Imagine you're on your phone. How accessible would this be? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It would be really hard to see on your phone. Yeah. So that's why for the good teacher, I made it very, very large. And this is a best practice. We know that visual support is a best practice, but not all visual support is the same. So later tonight, I have recommendations for text sizes that we found worked really well with students' phones this summer. For if you choose to use PowerPoint or Google Slides. If you choose to use a whiteboard, then do your thing. Do it, like normal in person. But if you're choosing to use a digital visual support, minimal text, large font is the best way to support students. Okay, so we have another stretch break. But before we do that, everybody jump into the chat and write one thing that you're taking away from the first half of this evening. What is sticking with you?
So some good techniques, great techniques for delivering a lesson, that gradual release of responsibility, keep messaging simple, student-centered lesson planning. Sentence frames help beginners, I swear by them. Repeat, use lots of visuals. TPR with body, face, and fingers. Teachers measuring student knowledge during the activity and adapting. So as we're figuring out what we're supposed to do, Kate can step up. Break down info into small bites. Like the participation with Annotate, need to figure it out through phones. Yeah, it's there, they can do it. It's just a little bit different. and keep it simple.
Awesome. I would like to go back to Elise's comment about the teacher measuring student knowledge during the activity and adapting. So the Zoom, maybe even more so than in person, it's very helpful to have a counterpart. So if you're in a situation where you have a co-teacher or an apprentice or assistant with you, it is super helpful because I probably have 4 windows open right now that I'm juggling between, and I'm minimizing and maximizing and typing in and stuff. And so Lizzie is helping me with everything else. So I am kind of watching your faces, but not as much as I would be able to in a real face-to-face classroom. So that is you and your co-teacher or apprentice or assistant, if you have one, can really collaborate on that. If you don't have one, that's okay, because you're going to have 6 students instead of however many are in the call right now. So it's going to be a lot easier. Great, everybody. Nice work. So let's take a little stretch break again. What should we do for this one?
Maybe while we're stretching, Kate, everyone can take this moment to move around, but you can answer a question from Dave, which is, how did you adapt as a single teacher this summer? Neither of us were single teachers.
2 assistants this summer, including Nancy, who's here tonight.
And I was with Margaret.
But we didn't hear from people. I think if I were solo, I would keep it all much simpler. I wouldn't be doing all the screen sharing. I wouldn't have the multiple documents. I would have my whiteboard and I would have Realia. And that really, really cuts down on the amount of brain power that you have to put into the managing of the tech. Would you agree, Lizzie?
Yes. I had a little bit of a leg up over the summer in that I was teaching at the university in the spring semester, so I had to move my university classes online. So I had a little bit of some tech teaching experience, so I wasn't as intimidated by like switching windows a lot while stuff was going. But yeah, I agree. How many things I was trying to do at once would go way down if I was by myself.
Yeah, other questions? Okay, let's get going again. Oh, did you have students write? Yes, Diane, I had the intermediate class and I did have students write. I had them type in the chat quite a bit. And then I also had them, we had a class WhatsApp group. And so often for their homework, I would have them write things and then send me a photo of them, or they would type it in the WhatsApp chat.
I would have my beginners write on paper and hold it up to the camera. That seems really difficult looking at this screen because there's 16 of us and the boxes are very small. But when there were 6, the camera squares were much larger. So it was pretty easy for me to read when they held it up to the camera. And then, yeah, we also did do texting in a WhatsApp group. Will it be likely to have co-teachers? We are still doing our 6-dimensional Sudoku of schedule planning. So that is to be determined. We're fitting those puzzle pieces together right now.
That would be ideal. We would love for everyone to have co-teachers.
Presume students were accepting of the technological glitches which did occur. Oh, absolutely. I would say all the time, just during class, Zoom class is weird, huh? And we would all laugh and then move on. They know we're doing it for the first or the second time. It's cool.
And they're learning it too. We were learning it together. It was very, very forgiving environment.
Yeah. Other examples of TPR, the stretching is a great one. Give instructions for stretching to practice things like directions or body parts. If you do health as a topic, body parts are great for TPR. I do instructions with TPR. So like, I need you to listen, repeat, look, or I give them like actions for usual class directions and we practice that.
there are a million things. You can do almost anything with TPR. Like Lizzie, I think, did prepositions, like the phone is above, or the pen is above the phone, the pen is on the phone, things like that. There are a million things you can do. And don't worry, because we're going to get into those activity kind of things in the next 2 sessions of the series. And these more nitty-gritty questions about voting on topics and time of day, I'm going to write those down and I'll answer those in a later email. But I want to keep us on lesson planning for the evening. But please continue to put them in there because we'll take note of them and address them later. Okay, so here we go. A little bit of a task. Everyone for our next activity is either an A or a B. So your task right now is to find your name and then change your name on Zoom to have that A or B in it. So for example, you go to participants, find your name, click on more, and then go to rename. So here is what it would look like. Let's say I'm an A. I'm just going to put A in front of my name because that's going to help us as we make groups. And by us, I mean Lizzie.
Would you like these pairs again, Kate?
Yes.
Okay.
So A's together and B's together. Everybody got it? Yes, yes, yes. Let's see if you still working on it. Okay.
Let's see. I'm still seeing some names without letters. You want to go to participants list, find yourself in the participants list, hover over your name. You'll see a button that says more and you can rename. You might need to scroll in the participants list because there are many of us. We're a large group. So you might need to scroll it down to find yourself.
Can you hear any background noise from my house?
The faintest, you're fine. It's very distant.
Dan, my husband, is watching a soccer game and he's yelling in the background.
Alrighty, I think that I have this.
Susan, it looks like I left
good
you
to
off of the
go.
list.
Susan, can I? Oh, I see. Susan, you meant on this slide, not on the participants list. I'm sorry.
Got you, Susan. I'm sorry.
Can I have you be a B, please? Just because of how I'm looking at the breakout rooms.
Okay, so we're going to look at an actual lesson because in person, many of us were using the Minnesota Literacy Council lesson plans. They have now changed their name to Literacy Minnesota, so I'm going to try really hard to say Literacy Minnesota. So we used their lesson plans a lot, and they are wonderful for in-person teaching, but they're going to take some adaptation for using on Zoom. So I took one of the Literacy Minnesota lesson plans, and I adapted it for Zoom. So we're going to look at that. You're going to look at it with a partner in the breakout room. And depending on your group, you're going to look at different things. So group A is looking at the objectives. What does the lesson want the students to be able to do by the end of the lesson? How do the lesson activities help accomplish that? And then what else, just general, because these Zoom lessons are new, what else do you notice about the Zoom lesson? Group B, you're looking at how each activity gradually releases that responsibility, the I, we, you. I, we, you. And then also, what else do you notice? So I'm going to put these questions and the link to the lesson plan in the chat. So when you get with your partner, you'll go to the chat, click on the lesson plan link, and then talk about those questions. And you'll have about 5 minutes to talk about those questions. Okay? Questions before we?
I was just going to say, let me know when you're ready to go because I have them set.
So let me put these things in the chat. Here come, those are the questions, and here is the link. Oh, that just went to Dave. Sorry. There's the link. Here are the questions. Just open that chat window, and Lizzie, go ahead.
Let's see, just a few more. Just a reminder that when you come back from a breakout room, you automatically come back muted, which is fine for what we're doing because we have so many people, but might confuse your students. They're always going to come back with their mics off, so. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You've got everybody, Kate?
Okay, great. So I hope that you were able to think about your discussion questions. So now, so for this first part, A's were together and B's were together. But now you're going to get into a mixed group so that your A's are going to join a group of B's. So you're going to be mixed. A's, you are going to summarize to the B's what you talked about. You're going to summarize what you talked about with the objectives. Then together, you're going to write one sentence. You're going to write a summary sentence all together about A's stuff. And you're going to do that. Well, let me explain the activity first. Then B's, you're going to explain about the gradual release of responsibility to the A's. Together, you're going to write one sentence about the gradual release of responsibility. So at the end of this time, you're going to have one sentence about the objectives, and you're going to have one sentence about the gradual release of responsibility. You're teaching each other about what you talked about. Okay? You're going to use a Google Doc to write these sentences so we can all see them. I'm putting an address in the chat right now. Everybody click on that address.
We're storing this information on Google Docs so that it's something you can't keep. After classes are over, it becomes materials for everybody. I never send my students links to anything.
So when you're, oh, I see you all in there. Good. So when you're in your group of 4 and you write your sentence, one person will be the secretary. They will type the sentence into this document. The cool thing about Google Docs is that you can see when someone else edits it. So you'll be able to see the sentences that you're writing with your group. Okay, so A's, you're explaining about objectives. B's, you're listening, then you write a sentence. Then B's are explaining about gradual releases of responsibility. A's, you're listening, then you write a sentence. Ready? Go ahead, Lizzie.
Okay. Can go ahead and open those rooms. And you can head on in. Couple more. All right, that should bring everybody back.
Okay, good sentences, everybody. All right, let me get my windows juggled. Okay, so let's take a look at the sentences here. I'll screen share this so you don't have to be in it. I know, the anonymous animals, that's just Google's thing. Okay, let me zoom in here. Can you see that okay? Is the text big enough? All right. So we've got, the students will be able to describe body parts and a malady, identify body parts verbally and describe medical symptoms, name and indicate, physically indicating the body parts, and describe ailments. The learning objectives were kept simple in order to reflect the tasks the teacher wanted their beginning level students to be able to complete. Yeah. Notice that those lesson objectives were not, they weren't unit objectives. It wasn't like we want students to be able to make appointments and talk to their doctors and talk to their pharmacists, and that's for the whole unit. It was baby steps for this lesson. Name 7 body parts, read and write those words, and describe symptoms with lots of TPR. So there's 2 ways of reinforcing. So notice that it wasn't just a random collection of activities. The activities were chosen very specifically to help the students be able to identify the body parts verbally and written and describe the symptoms associated with them. The activities were chosen on purpose because they met those objectives. Sorry, by the way, we're already over time, so if you need to go, please do, because we're recording it. We have about 10 minutes left after this activity, but we went over, I'm sorry. So sentences for the gradual release of responsibility. First, the teacher used TPR, which again is those actions. My head, my shoulders, my knees, my toes. Then students taught the group and discussed in pairs, and eventually repeated the exercise on their own. And then homework was that independent work. It increased in difficulty to engage the students. By the third part of the lesson, the third part, not the first part, students were sent into breakout rooms without a teacher. So there was lots of release of responsibility there. And then the homework was for them to do a video of themselves. So the teacher did the TPR to show the body parts. Then the students acted as the teacher. Then the students did it in breakout groups. And then student volunteers did it on their own. So that's a really good example of the baby steps. Yes, so when we're planning the lessons, the activities are not happening in isolation, but each part of the activity leads into the next, and each one we're getting a little bit more difficult and a little bit more independent. Little by little by little. Excellent, excellent summaries. Very nice. So, let's, Lizzie, would you screen share the best practices document again?
Yes, let me switch to that away from the breakout sentences and then share. Here we go. Okay.
So what best practices can we add now? Throw it in the chat.
Because I'm clicked into the Google Doc to type, Kate, I can't have the chat window at the same time.
Okay.
Cool.
Measurable tasks and activities. Yes, Elise. Oh man, this is a big one. You got something meaty there. So notice that when we look at the lesson, and we're going to talk about this a lot, I love lesson objectives. So notice that our objectives are name the parts of the body, read and write parts of the body, and describe medical symptoms using my blah blah hurts. So these are all three things that a teacher can see whether or not a student can do them. I can see if a student can name parts of the body. I can see if they can read and write them. So they help me measure student comprehension. Often we're tempted to use objectives like students will know the parts of the body. Students will learn the parts of the body. But these are problematic because knowing and learning is not visible. It happens in our heads. So we need to think about what is the physical or the action, the manifestation of that learning and knowing that I can see and actually measure. So again, that's why I'm always thinking about what I want students to be able to do, because I can see what they do. They can show me what they know or what they need help with. But you won't get away from that. I'll keep talking about that. And then increasing the level of responsibility throughout the class. Yes, from Deb. I do, we do, you do. Very nice. Okay. Thanks for that list, Lizzie.
Are you ready to go back?
Yeah, I just stopped you. Okay, we're almost there. So let's now take a look one more time at our objectives and see how we did. We're going to measure your comprehension because these are measurable learning objectives. So can you describe some Ella best practices? Everybody put one best practice in the chat.
Got TPR. Make it fun. Stress-free. Opportunities to speak. Small steps. Student-centered. Visual support. Preparation. Repetition.
These are great. Ooh.
We've got things that are visual, things that are auditory. Elise is hitting those, if you ever did one of those, what type of learner are you quizzes as a student. Baby steps, I do, we do, you do, independently do.
Okay, great. Can you explain how student-centered lesson objectives impact our choice of activities? What is the question that you want to think about when you're lesson planning? The question that you want students to think about when you're lesson planning, the big question about objectives. Exactly.
What should the students be able to do?
What do I want my students to be able to do when they leave? Those are my objectives. What do I want my students to be able to do when they leave? Great. And do you feel like you could identify examples of gradual release of responsibility? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yeah, you all did that in the lesson plan. Ooh, Diane, and what they want to be able to do. Yes, excellent point. Okay. Okay. One last little activity. Lizzie, would you please create pairs
We can keep the same ones going.
Sure, that's perfect. So everybody take 1 minute right now and think of the main thing that you're taking away from tonight. Wait, let me go back to my notes. One thing that you're taking away from tonight and one thing that you are still curious about. One thing you're taking away, one thing you're still curious about. You're going to go into your pair. One person will talk for 60 seconds. Then Lizzie will give you, up at the top of your screen, you'll see a little note from Lizzie. She'll say, time to switch. Then the other partner will talk for 60 seconds. Got it?
Ready, Kate?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. All right, we got everybody back, Kate.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your very enthusiastic participation this evening. I hope that you feel a little bit more confident with lesson planning. Again, next week, same time, same place, we'll be talking about listening and speaking activities, how we can adapt those Minnesota activities for Zoom. And the week after that will be reading and writing. One last thing before we go. Because you are our guinea pigs and this is our very first time doing teaching training on Zoom. We've done Zoom training on Zoom, but this was our first teaching training on Zoom. So I would like very much to know what was positive about this experience for you and what could we improve, because we'll be offering this again for a different group of folks. So any feedback you can provide us will be really helpful. And in the chat, if you go to your chat and you click on where it says everyone, you'll notice that you can select to send a message just to one person. So if you would send your answers to these questions to Lizzie, she's going to compile them and share them with me and the rest of the team so that we can revise this training and make it better for everybody in the future. So after you have sent your messages, please have a lovely evening. It's probably cool enough to go outside and walk now. And we'll see you next week, if not before.
A note on Zoom secret messages, especially if you're taking Zoom classes elsewhere. The host can see your secret messages after class. Your secret messages aren't secret from the host. I
How'd you learn that?
definitely talked smack about some classes while in a class and then later was informed that those secret messages weren't secret.
These days.
That's absolutely horrifying.
I just try to remind myself that all technology is always like one level creepier than I think it is.
There is no safe technology, maybe is the best way to think about that.
Uh-huh. Okay. These are all great. And like we said, once those messages are in, you are free. Be free. Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, bye.
See y'all.